Well, Katie and Ashley, welcome back to the show. Great to have you guys very remotely.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a quicker show than we probably anticipated doing. But then again, things are a lot different than the last one we did. It was that end of February, right?
Yeah, we'll accept any company that we can get. So even though you're via computer, it's like you're at our dining table.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me at your dining room table. So we wanted to talk a little bit about all the changes that have happened in the last 3 weeks and chat about, I guess, how the coronavirus COVID-19 is going to or already has affected the market. Obviously, you guys have a really good pulse on things from, doing houses, clients, coaching clients, et cetera. And maybe it would be a really interesting place to start is just hear a quick 30, 60-second overview, and we can, take it from there.
So obviously one thing that's dramatically changed just in the last week, and it changes daily, has been lenders, what lenders are doing, drawing their strings tighter as far as lending requirements, et cetera, checking up on jobs. And we've been deemed non-essential until April 9th. Buyer's agents have been. So properties aren't being shown right now except through virtual tours, and really only listing agent activity or buyers that have properties currently under contract are that's the only activity that's happening at this moment. But, I've been working with actually a couple of buyers who have been kind of priced out, beaten up on houses that list and have had multiple offers first day. And at this moment, we're kind of capitalizing on that. Buyers that are still secure with their jobs, they, are able to do the virtual tours and they're getting better prices, which is, definitely a positive of what's happening and all the negativity.
Mm-hmm. Ashley, do you want to add anything to that?
I just think that everything's changing day by day. So we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know if this April 9th date that the county set in place is going to be a solid date or if that will be extended further. But I do think that if you're a buyer and you have been, like she said, beat up or frustrated with multiple offer situations, sellers are a bit more motivated at this point because fear drives all types of emotions. And so sellers are a bit more motivated.
What would you tell a seller that if you had a listing, hypothetical, I don't know if you do or don't, but what would you be telling somebody that you have a listing with? Should you be aggressive in discounting, ride out the wave? How would you approach that conversation?
That really depends on when they purchase the house and what kind of financial situation they're in. We have a listing that we're getting ready to go live with this weekend. Mm-hmm. The benefit is you have a captured audience, even though they can't actually go into the house. We've moved very quickly over to virtual tours, dollhouse photos, trying to make it as lifelike as possible for people to view the homes. But so the house we're putting out this weekend, it's in Kenilworth, and the woman purchased it, decided she didn't want to live there. She's putting it back out, and she's in a position where she knows, she's not going to make top dollar. And so we are pricing that aggressively to move. Right. Whereas we have another house that we listed right at the brink of kind of the stay safe, stay home mandate.
Yeah.
And we immediately had a virtual tour done, same kind of scenario. And believe it or not, we are getting interest even in this time frame. That house typically would have gone on under contract probably in 3 to 5 days. Mm-hmm. Had we been in our regular market. It's still available at this time. But, she's in a position where she's ready to hold and kind of ride the wave.
Right.
It really just depends on the seller.
Yeah.
as the sellers are maybe thinking about what's the best course of action, I'm sure you've gotten the question like, hey, is this going to last for a while? Like, should I not list? Should I list? What do you like? Obviously, nobody has a crystal ball, but how do you navigate? Please share the information with us then. Yeah. Like, how do you navigate that decision of, do you just wait 2 weeks and just list it then? Do you take advantage of that again? You said you have a captive audience, you just list and you list aggressively, or how, what's that process, or what are the questions to ask yourself, I guess?
Well, we're sellers ourselves. We have lots of houses that we put on the market every few weeks. So one thing I definitely would take into consideration as a seller right now is that most mortgage companies, I think, are halting jumbo loans. So if you're going to be priced over that 450 mark, you
just have to be prepared to bring more to the table if that's the case. But typically in that loan sphere, people are doing more, you're doing a conventional loan, you're bringing 20% anyway. So that does give you a little bit of a buffer. And as far as we go, we're trying to maintain business as normal because, I've worked through the housing market for, 15 years. And so I've ridden the waves, and they will come and they will go. And so I think aggressive pricing is the best thing that you can do for now, but I think you have to still maintain business as normal and keep putting the product out there. And, how I see it, at least, is, I feel like the way that our governor and our city has handled this epidemic and just handles life in general makes it a really desirable place to be, and our climate is good, our seasons are good. And I feel like it's going to continue to draw people wanting to move here. And it may be after the crisis mode is over. But, people are going to see the benefit of some of these smaller towns like ours,
right?
And want to move here. And so having the product available at, when they make that decision, I think is important.
Yeah, it's not like the mountains are going to be less beautiful 2 months from now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I would also say more people are going to be working home than ever before after this. This will change the way that we do business in America. And so I think that people are going to really be considering what they have in their surroundings and what it is that they need. And, they're going to need, people always need places to live.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And that's a good point. So, I was reading an article about how every major crisis kind of shapes a generation. And one thing that we'll probably see come out of this event is more remote working situations. And one of the drawbacks of Asheville has been the lack of big companies that we have here to provide, finance.
Right.
And, if people are able to work remotely and they could live anywhere, this is a great town. And I think more and more people will take advantage of that.
Yeah. If there's more remote workers and that becomes more of a normal thing, then people can choose to live based on location and not job. And that, for any town or any place that's comparable to Asheville, it's going to be a huge influx of, in theory, high paying jobs if that holds true.
Right.
When you guys are, okay, you've gone, you said 15 years, right? So you've gone through a cycle before. Is there anything about this that feels familiar? Obviously the trigger points are different, but is there anything that you're like, oh, I remember these conversations or these feelings or whatever the case might be?
I will have to say, this definitely feels better than the 2008 crisis, because it was completely centered around real estate.
Right.
And I think it shaped a lot of people's fears regarding real estate today. But, I think one thing that at least I see is, the stock market is really is more volatile than the real estate market, in that, if you buy a house as a rental, as, whatever kind of investment you're living in it, whatever kind of investment it is, at the end of the day, you have something tangible to hold on to. If a business goes bankrupt and your stock goes down the toilet, it can be gone.
Yeah.
But, no matter what, people have to have a place to live. So if you own a house and say you bought it for $300, maybe it's only worth $250 today, you can still rent it out. You can still make your mortgage. You can still, have a long-term game to where you're not left holding nothing.
You have a tangible asset
of the day. Yeah, you have something. And so, in my mind, it only encourages me and or I would think other people to invest more into real estate, because the waves are not as long. Like, we don't know how long it'll take the stock market to rebound, but we know that tomorrow someone will need a house.
Yeah, and the pricing might be different tomorrow, but again, you have a lot. I would say I don't know anything about stocks. I should rephrase, but you have some. It feels like there's a lot more flexibility with the house, right? You can rent it. I mean, you can sell it at a loss if you have to. You can, sometimes negotiate with a bank or do different things. Like, there's a lot more options on the tables than just seeing it just drop and being like, well, sell or not sell. Control. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the thing. Like, with stocks, you have no control. If the stock market tanks, it's not like, and you pull your stock out, you can put it in something else. But with a house, we know that rental rates aren't going to, in a depressed market, rental rates go up. They don't go down. And so, if nothing else, all you have to do is hold tight, whether you're making money immediately or not is another scenario. But, once that note's paid off, that's just all income. Plus you have the product itself. Mm-hmm.
Talking about the rental market and whatnot, and just in general about real estate, I don't even remember who said this. And so I know it's a popular quote, I'm sure, but it's like, you make your money when you buy and you collect it when you sell, when it comes to real estate. Mm-hmm. I mean, you all are plugged into the market. In general, do you think people that you've been working with and talking to have been buying correctly, and also homeowners, as far as making sure that they're not overpaying and being in over leveraged positions? Or do you think we're in danger of seeing a lot of people being underwater? If this continues, right? I mean, maybe next week we're having conversations like, oh, it's all good. But assuming that,
if it's all good, then we're good. We don't even need to.
But yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, do you have any feel of like, or have you talked to anybody who's like, man, like, I'm really concerned, or whatever the case might be?
I mean, I think that there's going to be a certain amount of people that are going to be upside down, and that's going to be due to job loss more than anything. Like, if, and hopefully the government will pull through with some mortgage deferment or some ways to kind of help people in a crisis mode. But, if you've bought in the last 2 years, you're going to need to hold for a little while. And it may just be 6 months.
Right.
Like, I do feel like people are going to have a new lease on life once we get through this. I mean, we've all been cooped up in our houses for X amount of time.
With children.
Everyone's homeschooling.
Yes.
So, on one side, I'm like, well, at this point in time, home base is like the most important thing in someone's life. Mm-hmm. Like, like your home is your whole world at this moment. And so I think that there's no way but to highlight how important that is. And people are going to start thinking, like, what do I really want from a homestead, from my home? What do I need? And I think when possible, they're going to try to make that happen. Because I think it'll leave a little tinge of fear in everyone. If this happens again, where am I going to be stuck?
Do I want to be in this position in this house again?
We're not going to say what it might do to relationships.
I mean, I love old houses, and we live in an almost 100-year-old house, and I love it. But for the last week, I've been like, damn, we should really build a house. Like, I don't know that this is working anymore.
Well, I'm curious, just curious, what is it about the old house that being inside of it for X amount of time, it makes you be like, time for some new construction?
Just space, you know, like
it's not.
It's smaller. And I mean, it's not super small, but it's not huge.
It's multi-level. I think, you know, like with the older houses, you might have a smaller like we have 3 levels on our house. And so like, there's not a lot of hiding room with the kids' crap. And now that
you see the board games,
now that we're a homeschool center as well, you know,
lack of storage and just space in general.
So we kicked the kids out. We decided that would definitely increase our space.
Where'd you kick them out to?
They're on the front porch.
Front porch. Yeah. No, it is interesting when you do spend a lot of time inside of your house, like when you start thinking about it and realizing what's important. Like I've always been like, man, the smaller the house, the better, like less to clean, less to deal with, less variables. And, you know, during this time, it was like, well, crap, where am I going to work from home? Like, you know, we have a 4-year-old. It's like, I can't like just post up in the living room or kitchen table because then there'll be somebody climbing on me the whole time. Right. And
or like so, your dog's barking or
don't have a dog. So yeah.
all of our smoke and carbon monoxide detectors decided that the batteries were going to go out at the same time. But they've managed to do like, you know, 12 hours apart from one another. So at 2:30 in the morning, it's beeping like, please change battery. And, you know, none of us are sleeping great right now as it is. So that definitely wasn't helpful.
Stats to the adventure of it, right? Right. Well, going back to the housing side of things, you know, with people that you're working with or just for yourselves, are you approaching the buying process differently? Besides the financing thing, I know that obviously that's a big deal, making sure to, you know, you're able to line money up. But when you, especially from a project like, you know, before we started recording this, we were talking about a project that I'm looking at doing and just being like, hey, like, you know, like, is this a realistic expectation for where it's going to be in 3 months? And just having those conversations. Are you doing any adjustments or?
For sure. I mean, I think this is the time to be aggressive with your buying because just like as a buyer, you're not sure where things are going to be in 3 months. As a seller, they're not sure where things are going to be in 3 months. And so I don't want to say like take advantage of the situation, but I'm saying take advantage of the situation as far as
protect yourself if you're a buyer.
You know, making a smart purchase makes you a good seller in the end. And so, you know, I think, you know, if you look back historically, you know, at what our market did the first year of the housing crisis, like we were 9% down. Well, so think at least that you want to buy 9% down from where we are now, just to protect yourself.
Do you think we're going to have a relatively quick bounce back, or are you thinking this is like a 2021, 2022 conversation? And I know that's total gut feel, impossible to predict.
It really is impossible to predict. The one thing I will say is I think that people are going to want to get out of their houses and they're going to want to go shopping and they're going to want to go out to eat and to bars, and people are tired of being cooped up. So I hope that in the hospitality industry that it bounces back really quickly. I hope in the travel industry that it will too. But I know that a lot of contractors in the travel industry have been laid off recently, and those are the jobs that it seems like may or may not come back right away.
I mean, I don't know. I was looking at China's market, not that that has any impact on us. You know, and their housing market is moving back into position pretty quickly. And I would hope and think that we're going to be in a similar situation. Like, honestly, if I was in some other places that are more volatile climate wise, and, you know, between rising waters and tornadoes, et cetera, I think I would be more concerned. But I feel like we have so many things going for us here and such a lack of inventory just in general that I'm really hopeful that that's going to give us the cushion to bounce back faster.
I'm going to wade into a dangerous topic here. So if it starts getting in over our heads. Sorry?
Are you dancing? Does that have anything to do with dancing?
No, nothing. No, as
right.
much as I say I like it to dance, I am not a very good dancer. My wife's a 10 times better dancer than me every day of the week. Yeah, here I am embarrassing myself live. But so moving back to the dangerous topic. So we'll pull back if we need to, but it's more about talking about like the tension right now with landlords and tenants, right? And my question around that is, do you think this is going to change how either landlords or tenants approach renting and or owning in the future, in the sense of, so I think this past week we released an episode, just like my 2 cents on how to approach it and what we're doing with our rentals and how to try to, navigate and thread the needle as far as, being responsible to the business, but also like, how do you show up and help people as much as you can? But do you think people who are in a situation where maybe they're working with a landlord that's not helpful, not communicative, whatever the case might be, is that going to push them into a situation where they might buy quicker? And do you think this is going to change any landlords from being like, wow, like I had 3 months where I just didn't get rent paid. Like I'm out. I'm not doing that again. I know that's a super loaded question. And so we can deflect it and move on to something else.
I think it's I think it's pertinent in that, it's a real issue because a lot of the people that are in rentals are in jobs that maybe aren't as secure, like especially in our town, that being the service industry, which we know, a lot of most all people in the service industry are currently furloughed or have been laid off completely. And, I don't know how most people run their rentals, but when I'm advising people when they're purchasing rentals, there's X amount of profit per month that they should be making. And as a landlord myself, whatever that extra is, I'm either banking for repairs or non-rental time, or I'm putting it towards principal. So, if you're on the front end, if you're thinking as a landlord, okay, my note's $700 a month, I'm getting $1,000 a month, I have $300 a month, extra, instead of taking that draw, you're putting it into some kind of account to wade time,
like a reserves account.
Yeah. And there's always a period of time where even if you may not have a renter at all, and part of that will also depend on how mortgage companies respond to the situation. I've heard a lot of different scenarios of how they may help. But if as an owner of a house, how long it takes to be foreclosed on. Yeah. You have 6-12 months before they enact any kind of process to foreclose. That being said, between any kind of reserve you have and that time frame, hopefully you could catch back up. And at the end of the day, you still have something tangible that you could sell. I just think that rentals are a smart long-term game, no matter what kind of market we're in. And I look at them typically not as an immediate return. I look at it as a long-term hold.
Yeah, you're going to be happy 5 years from now you own that piece of property or whatnot. Yeah.
Right. And so, my thought is this is the time that landlords should be trying to purchase rentals. Because if the market rebounds as it was 4 weeks ago, it's hard to find it's hard to find a property in Asheville that's going to give you the return that you want as a landlord. Mm-hmm. So scooping in and trying to find a couple of those deals now, if you have the ability, is ideal.
As far as tenants, once this is over, wanting to purchase their own homes, I mean, I think that most people want to purchase their own homes, aside from you, Rodrigo. But I think that most people have that dream or want to own their own property and don't necessarily want to pay rent for their whole lives. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not they have a secure job and can get a loan when.
And part of me thinks that, like, if someone holds their job through this process, that it's going to make them feel that much more secure
and confident
towards purchasing a house, because they're going to be like, I weathered this storm. My job is secure. Let's do this.
Well, so going back to the whole home ownership question, it's super interesting, right? Because I think this is the exact type of scenario where if you lost your job and you didn't have any foreseeable income in the future, would you prefer to be a homeowner or a tenant right now?
A homeowner.
See, I would disagree. If an eviction is way less, is going to affect you long-term a lot less than a mortgage.
That's not true. I mean, so look at it like this. I'm a tenant at your house. Mm-hmm. You evict me.
Yeah.
That's a court procedure that goes on my record.
Correct.
When I go to rent my next house, what's the first thing that they do?
They're going to pull,
and they're going to see that you were evicted.
Correct. Right? And if you say, I got evicted because of the corona, like, craziness that happened in 2020. I mean, at least I know as a landlord, I'd be like, okay, like, how did it go after that? Did you have anything before or afterhand? Whereas unless something changes, you get foreclosed on. Nobody's caring why you got foreclosed on.
Well, but the thing is, so there's a couple options. There's foreclosure and there's short sale, but how long do those processes take?
I agree that the foreclosure can take a long time.
They take a long time.
Right.
So how long does that give you to get back on your feet to try to get in good standing with your loan?
It can give you probably a longer time than that you're as a tenant. My whole point is, like, the flexibility, right? Like, if you're in this situation, and this is why I think renting is absolutely has a really important part in and should be celebrated a little bit more, is if you just lost your job and you can't and you don't know, like, when you're going to get back on your feet, man, I would love the ability to be like, man, I can't pay this $1,200 a month rental. Let's go find a rental for $650 a month and we'll figure it out. And if we want to break lease or have a different conversation with our landlord 4 months from now, we can do that and we can bounce back up to the $1,200 a month rental. So
why couldn't you, if you owned the house, why couldn't you rent the house for $1,200 and then go rent something for $600 for yourself, or get a roommate to help cover your mortgage, or turn your basement into an apartment, or, there's a whole slew of things that you could do.
Absolutely. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with any of those things. I think a lot of those things that you're talking about, though, are going to happen because you're aware of those options because you're in the business, you're in the game, right? Whereas if you've never bought, sold, or rented something before, it's going to, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for everybody, but, like, I remember before I got into real estate, I was like, yeah, you just either rent or you don't. And, like, or you pay your mortgage or you don't. Like, there's not a ton of flexibility or options on how to, like, house hacking or any of those things that we've talked about before on this podcast. Like, those are educational components, right? And so,
what I would do is I would call you and I'd be like, look, I need somebody to rent my basement, and I know you're a renter, so why don't you come and help me build my wealth by living in my basement for a little while? Really, I feel like the difference between homeownership and being a tenant is if you like to be in control of your options or not. Because, like, as a tenant, at any given time, a landlord could decide to sell the house you live in. One.
True.
If you can't pay your rent, you can be evicted in a matter of weeks.
Yep. They can raise your rent.
There's so many variables that you are not in control of. But as a homeowner, you're getting a 30-year fix, at the very least, a 5-year ARM. Step by step what's expected of you. And if you're really above the curve, and we're getting into situations like this, then people are thinking, okay, I'm laid off, do I have any friends that I could rent a room to? Do I, could I, should I put it up for rent, like Ashley said, and move into something else? You just have a lot more options and a lot more control over your foreseeable future.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I think I like renting for the same reason you're advocating for the home ownership. I just think you have more control as a tenant, and you have are you going to get a better negotiation with your landlord or with your bank as far as hey, can I pay 50% of my rent and that's okay, and we just go back to normal in month 2? Yes or no? A bank's going to be well, we'll file some paperwork and we're going to charge you X amount of interest and tack it into the back of your loan. And if you miss one more payment though, then you're totally up the river. And, so I was curious to hear or see, because I think it's going to be an interesting case study to see how people come out of this feeling wow, I felt like this was a terrible option for me. I'm going the other end, which is either I'm going back to renting or I'm going back to home ownership, depending how things play out. And I think the big variable there is going to be landlords, right? How landlords interact with their tenants, I think is going to be a huge determining factor for how people view renting in general.
Yeah. I mean, it would be to me, the thought of it is so stressful. If I couldn't pay my rent and I had to move out, well, who's the first person, if you go to rent the next house, one day after you've been evicted from house A,
mm-hmm.
What kind of finances do you need to show them? Who's going to trust that you can pay it when you already said you couldn't pay, and that's why you had to leave the last house? So how are you going to pay for this house?
No, and it's not. It's. I think it's just a hard conversation either way, and maybe it's because I'm a renter right now and rent as long as I possibly can, convince everybody on my side of the table to rent.
That's much longer. I know you'll be back. But get up.
Yeah, no, the momentum's swinging. I'm well aware.
I'll be showing you houses on April the 10th, homie.
No, well, oh boy, that's really quick. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting. I've been really thinking about that a lot because I guess it's my hypothesis, I'm going to find out how true or not it is talking to people over the next couple of months is, hey, oh, you're a homeowner. Did you feel in control? Oh, you're a tenant. Did you feel in control? How did that go, et cetera?
Some of our friends that have been laid off due to working at bars and a few of them are homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
And in all honesty, and they had roommates to begin with. Because they were smart and they made a purchase of a home, and they made it a scenario where they had a renter in the house to support
mm-hmm.
basically the household costs.
Right.
And so that's saving them at this point because it's carrying them through this time.
No, and I think it goes back to buying right, and if you're buying a house and you can house hack. We've talked about this on the show a lot. It's you totally should.
The house that I'm thinking of right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, it was a wholesale deal we brought together.
Oh, cool. Well, that's even better then. Yeah, that's I think it just goes to that, right? Buy right. If you are buying off market and whatnot, you're probably typically going to be buying right. That's not 100% the case, but typically I'd say it holds true. Well, yeah, let's wrap it up. I guess any final closing comments on anything, something we've touched or anything we haven't touched or, anything we might've missed?
I mean, I think the main thing just in this state that the world is in right now is just, everybody just needs to do their best. And I would say as far as we're concerned, anything that we can do to help people, if people have questions, I think we both think outside of the box and try to figure out solutions that may not come to mind for people that aren't so into the business. So if there's anything that we can do to try to help people and, figure out ways to help people keep their homes, buy new homes, we're open and available to make that happen. Reach out.
Yeah. Ashley, do you have anything? Or just a ditto?
Yeah, I think it's just important to remember that this is temporary and there are still a lot of unknowns. So we're all working based on how we're feeling or based on what our hunch is and, the tidbits of facts that we get every day in the news briefings. So I think that we can look to the other countries that have weathered this before us and see maybe that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we will get through this. And we just have to all breathe and take it easy until then, because we don't know, and it's never good to act out of fear.
Yeah, that's super good note to end on. And I was just thinking, I'm going to add one thing to this as well. Is like, if you are a tenant or a landlord, I think your experience on this is going to have a really direct correlation on how you've communicated with the other party leading up to this moment. If you've in general had good, consistent communication about anything, this is probably going to be a lot smoother road for you than if you've not been communicative, ignoring people, etc. So just a good reminder, that's what we've been telling everybody, is like, just over communicate about everything. Always, especially now, and any bumps in the road are going to be a lot smaller. So real quick, what's the best way for people to reach out to you or connect with you guys?
homespuninvestmentrealty.com,
katiebean@gmail.com. Homespun has our telephone numbers.
Everything that you need is at
Don't show up at my house. You can call.
Yeah, no doubt. Cool. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and have this conversation. And hopefully the next time we're talking, we're doing it in person.
That'd be awesome. We'll have a follow-up. We'll have a follow-up soon.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Take care.
Thanks, Rodrigo.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.